Well, I was travelling overseas for 5 years, and when I got back, my good friend Bobby Baker, who I'd known since I was about 16, he'd had a abalone licence. So Bob said to me, why don't I come over and join him as a deckhand crew member on his abalone boat. And I did that for a couple of years with him, and then he bought a cray licence, and he had a dual licence. And the trouble is the government at the time said you can't have a dual licence, so he had to hand one back, and he handed back the abalone licence. In the meantime, we could have found out he could have transferred it to me, and so it would have worked that way. And while we were crayfishing up the west coast, especially out of Ceduna near Cannon Reef, we used to see schools of bluefin tuna just rippling all around the boat. And then every now and again we'd see an aeroplane come over, and Sam Saren's boat, New Dolphin, one day came right up within a couple of hundred metres of us, and they were screaming and yelling, and they went into the patch of fish and they were just hauling them in one after the other. And I was so excited seeing all this action compared with pulling up cray pots day in, day out, day in, day out. And so I decided that I wanted to leave the cray industry and get into the tuna. And it was a pretty tight-knit community, but knowing people here, I came back and I managed to get a job on a boat called the Roslyn Star, and it was skippered by Jürgen Zemke, and we were pretty successful. And then he went into partnerships, I think, with Joe Valenti, and Joe Valenti built a brand new boat called the Ocean Dynasty. And so we went out at the beginning of the season and we were very successful. We fished tuna, poling mainly around Scales Bay, Beards Bay, lumps. And when we came back after a very successful trip, we filled her up with 70 odd tonne, got home, and Robin said, Kiwi, there's a notice in the Port Lincoln Times for apprentice tuna spotter. Why don't you apply for that? And I said, what for? And she said, well, you'll be home a lot more. She said, you won't be out fishing all the time. So I looked at the paper and I realised it was Port Lincoln Tuna Processors, the number. So I rang Ted Roberts, who was the boss there at the time, and said, look, Ted, I see there's an apprentice tuna spotter. I'd like to put my name down. And he said, no, you can't do that. He said, you've got to come in for an interview and CV and all that. And I said, that's a lot of garbage. I said, just put my name down, will you? And he said, no. I said, all right, well, chuck me in the hat, please put me in. And he said, well, I'll see what I can do. So we went out baiting that night, went fishing, went up there again, filled the boat up, came back. And when we got to the Trowbridge Wharf in Lincoln, there was Ted Roberts. He took the ropes. So we threw the ropes and tied her up, and he'd come on board and he said, you got the job. I went, what? He said, yeah, you got the job tuna spotting. I said, how come? And he said, well, there were 76 applicants. And he said, the guy that ran the show was called Rupert Marr, and he was the chief spotter for Port Lincoln Tuna Processors, but he was in Eden. So he rang up Ted and said, look, who are the people that have applied for it? And they said, oh, Bob Smith and Hopalong Cassidy and Ted Mix and blah, 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 blah. And he went down the list and he got to Kiwi. And he said, stop. He said, is Kiwi the guy on the tuna boat? And he said, yes. And he said, well, I've talked to him a lot on the radio, because what happens is that Jürgen Zemke, the skipper, used to love to pole tuna. And so I was the smallest guy on the boat, and I was the chummer and the cook, and I used to go up the crow's nest spotting. So he'd call me up to the wheelhouse and I would steer the boat around the lumps, around the fish. The plane would come over and Rupert would call up the boat, and he'd say, where's Jürgen? And I'd say, and who's this? And I'd say, Kiwi White. Well, get Jürgen. I said, no, he's down in the racks poling. Oh, okay, well, turn the boat 30 degrees to port or starboard and head off out here. I've got another patch of fish for you. So anyway, that's how I basically got my job. So the company said, well, we'll put you with another spotter and a pilot in a Cessna 337. And he said, we want you to probably spend 3 years sitting behind the other guys to learn the ropes. So I got all excited about it, and I accepted the job. And the funny part about it, he said to me, how much do you want? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, how much do you want to do the job? And I said, well, I've got no idea. And we'd already earned $4,000 for the season. So I thought, round figure, $20,000, $16,000 to make me $20,000 for the year, which I thought was a fortune. So he said, accepted it straight away. And we found out Rupert was on about 50 or 60,000, but he'd had experience. So consequently, they put me in a plane with Derek Hamer and I think it was Andrew Jacob, and we went up to Ceduna and we took off and we went out to 210 Heart Lump out in the Great Australian Bight. And I remember the first day it was glassy calm and these fish came up rippling everywhere. And I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know whether I was east, west, north or south, upside down, inside out. And I felt sick with the heat and the noise and everything. And I thought, God, what have I let myself into? But within a few days, I settled down. And I'd go out with the guys, and next minute, oh, there's a patch of fish over here. What do you mean? I said, look, can't you see there's a fish over here? Come up, oh yeah, there is, and oh, another one here. And within 3 months, they said, for God's sake, get him his own plane and get him out of our hair and let him go himself. And because I was so keen and enthusiastic about it all. So they got us a plane and a pilot, and we took off. And in those days, we had no GPSs, so we had a plasterboard, a masonite board with a clip. I had a chart, I had a stopwatch, and we used to work on 2 miles a minute average with our speed, but we never had any clue whether we had headwind or tailwind or whether we were drifting, either way. And so we would go out towards the boats, and we had a radio, and we'd speak to the boats. In those days there wasn't basically a scrambled radio. We'd speak to them, and I'd call up Zora, Stan Lucan. I'd say, Stan, put on your NDB, non-directional beacon. He would tell us it's 891. We'd tune into 891 and the direction finder, and we'd follow that until we managed to get to the boats. When we got to the boats, then I used to take an assessment of which boats were there and which companies, and then I'd do searches around. And I actually flew the plane physically, had my headset on and watching the instruments and try not to run into any other aircraft. And you look into the water and you scan, and then when you find something that's of interest, I would try and work out the direction of where the boats were and direct them to the patch of fish. They'd look at me and say, they call me up and say, how much do you think's in the patch? I'd say it's 20 tonne or 50 tonne, 200 tonne. Then they wanted to know within a kilo or two of how the average size of the tuna are, which was very difficult to start with. But as time progressed, you used my thoughts and compared that to what they actually caught. And so over the years, we actually got better and better and better of estimating the fish and the size and all the rest of it. So that's how we used to direct the boats. But I remember one day we left Ceduna and there was a lot of thunderstorms, and we put our direction finder on and we got a really strong signal. So we followed it and we finished up. It took us 5 hours to find the boats because it's a big sea, big ocean out there. And they couldn't really tell us where they were, and so that's what happened. And then LRN Omegas came in, and the company spent about $120,000 installing these Omegas in the planes. And we'd have to sit at the end of the runway for 15 minutes or so to let the calibrate, and we put the Latin long in, and we'd head off, and that gave us a much, much more accurate way of finding the boats. But then when GPSs came in, it was just unbelievable, because boats would call us up on the radios, HF radios in the old days, and then after that they got sat phones, so we could call us up on the phones, and they would give us their position. So we'd just punch in the position of where the boats are, and off we'd go. And it might be 150 miles out there. We'd get out to the boats. When I got to the middle of the boats, I used to push man overboard, which puts a flashing cursor on the GPS, and that was my centre. And then I used to go off and used to fly like a bird, try and just do whatever you thought was right and get the sun right and find the fish. And then I would push the button when we got over a patch of fish, and that way then I would radio the boats with digitalised scramble radio only to our companies, and then they would punch that into their computer and come towards the fish. And if we would go off flying and searching, and if they couldn't find it, they would always call us back to the patch, and sometimes we go there, and we had some interesting time. So I finished up 34 years in tuna spotting. We did something like 12,000 hours. We had 3 major engine failures, come home with the engine, one engine, and that was pretty scary a couple of times. We got caught in thunderstorms. Bad weather in New South Wales, bad weather off of Nullarbor sometimes, and I'm very, very grateful that we even survived the whole procedure. Sorry, that was one question.
I think you wrapped it up. We can pick up. No. It was excellent.
Yeah.
We wish every interviewee was like that instead of having to extracting it like extracting teeth.
Yeah.
When did you follow the first tuna?
Would have been about 1977 because I worked for Bobby Baker for 7 years, crayfishing, and I did relief abalone diving, as I said. And I worked for a lot of abalone divers, including Rodney Fox and Peter Thompson and the whole mob of them. But I used to love it. Even though I was small, I found that I used the technique was fine. And then when we got on to bigger fish, like on the Dinjera over the coast of Eden, we had 2 and sometimes 3 polars. And Kenny Henderson from Tumby Bay, he was the lead polar on the Dinjera with the Puglisies, and he would put the squid in the water and jiggle it, and every now and again suddenly he'd just lift up, and I said, what's going on? He said, that fish is too bloody big. And he put the pole back in, and then we'd pull a smaller one in. But a lot of guys who were really big and strong, you'd think that they'd be good polars, but they weren't. And a lot of the smaller guys seemed to be able to work, pull a fish in. It was very, very exciting. And we felt really proud when we came in with a full load and we walked down the jetty after unloading it, and you know, you're sort of beating your chest that we'd filled up the boat. And even though the money was never added money in it, even with the tuna spotting, I never really made much money at all. But the companies I worked after Port Lincoln Tuna Processors, I had 1 or 18 months working for CSIRO, where we did government surveys. And so the government wanted to get an idea of the stock of tuna. So I was one of the few guys that they put in the planes, and we had different planes. Instead of a Cessna 337, we had Air Commander 500Ss, and we'd work out of Ceduna, and we'd do transects from the coast, 120 miles to the south, and then we'd turn off and go 30 miles to the west, and then we'd come in again, and we'd do that all day. And we would, anything that we saw, we could leave the transact line and go over and check to see the fish and record those fish. So that was really interesting to give those figures. And then I got a job with Tony Santic from the Mackay Diva fame and Steer Group, and I worked for them for the rest of my tuna spotting career. And in 1996, just after the Croatian War had finished, Tony Santic said, Kiwi, you're a diver, because I'd helped to clear out all the fish when they died. They lost, what is it, $60 million worth of fish or something? 40, how much? 14 million. 14, oh, I thought it was a lot more. But anyway, so because I'd done abalone diving, Tony had to get divers to go and get all the dead fish out of the cages. So we worked with professional divers, even though we weren't licensed as such, as licensed professional divers. He said to me, well, we're going to start up in Croatia because the war had just finished. So he picked a couple of us, a guy called Dave Foken and myself, and they shipped us off to Croatia. And they'd sent over container loads to build a tuna cage, the same as they use here. And we spent quite a few months assembling everything and fixing up the nets and everything. And then we hired local boats, and we went out in the Adriatic Sea between Italy and Croatia. And there's an island out there called Jabuka, which means in Croatian the Big Apple. And so the Croatians claimed the water around that island, and we found tuna, and we actually, Dave and I are credited with the first ever transfer of northern bluefin tuna from a set shot with a purseiner into a floating cage over there, and that was in 1996. So for 4 years, Tony and the Steer Group sent us over to Croatia. So I learned a little bit of Croatian and loved the people and had a good time. And then at the end of the 4 years, we'd actually done ourselves out of a job because we taught the locals what to do, and they said that they didn't need us anymore. And so they sent us, after the tuna season here, I did 6 years in Ensenada, in Mexico, and based in San Diego and Rosarito and Ensenada, and we worked the tuna and started up, helped a company called Baja Aqua Farms, which was set up by Christian Huntington and his father and Tony Santic, and we worked all the tuna grounds right down to Cabo St. Lucas and further. And actually I've just been past there just last week. I was on a cruise ship and we came past all the grounds and the fishing grounds. And so we did that, and I was the only. No, there was 2 Australians on a Mexican tuna boat, 1,400 tonner, with 23 crew and huge nets, and they had helicopters and everything. And I worked there for 6 years with the Mexicans, and my job was there up in the crow's nest spotting the fish. And they wanted me to go in the helicopters, but their helicopters were very, very small Robertson 22s and Robertson 44s and some old Bells, and they had no idea about talking to the other planes and helicopters. And there was a couple of mid-air collisions where they crashed in there, and I saw another helicopter take off on one boat, and he just got airborne, and next minute smoke pouring out, and he actually crash landed, auto landed onto a deck of the rear deck of a tuna boat. So I said, I'm not going up in the helicopters, it's too dangerous. So my job was that once we'd found the fish and they shot the fish in, my job was to jump in the net and swim down and look at the mass of fish inside the net, and I'd look at it and see it be a shed like this, and I'd say probably 40 or 50 tonne of fish. And the problem is that because I worked for Baja Aqua Farms, and these boats were basically subcontracted by the company, the crew were only paid $1 a tonne. So if I said there's $40 tonne there, that's all they get. So they would say it's 200 tonne. And they actually I thought I was actually going to get, I was told that to be really careful, because they said some nights people fall overboard, don't they? And we never find them again. So they wanted me to up my ante, and I said, I'm not going to do it. And I said, I'll tell it as it is, because I always pride myself that I'll be honest in the whole business, because there's been some cases in the past that I believe that some of the people have been paid off to look after.
About that, was there any intrigue with the tuna spotting? Was there any attempts of bribery or?
Well, I believe it's happened here and in overseas, but I think people, they knew that I wasn't going to be involved. I decided, and I actually got myself wrapped over the knuckles a few times, because there was one case here out on the shelf, the continental shelf. I found a really nice patch of fish, and Samis Gold Giraffe had a little boat, and I can't even think of the name of it. It was one of the smallest boats in the fleet, and he was the closest. So naturally, I said to that boat, you've got to go to that patch of fish. And of course, he was struggling, because there was a huge patch, like 60 or 80 tonne patch of fish, and they were big fish, and they were struggling to get on. And these other guys, once the boat's got the fish, that's basically theirs, and they're not supposed to come in and try and take them. But I got sort of told off after that I should have given it to Stan Lucan or to Karina G or one of the other bigger boats who could have made a better job of it. And I hear that one person got paid quite a bit of money under the hand, and I'm probably saying the wrong thing, but it's all, I don't care anymore. And somebody was actually given a car by one of the guys to look after him. And I do know a few other stories, but it's probably best I don't say it on camera. But there's quite a few things that I could say. But I've had it one time, the first time I was with a guy called Des, and we were out at Don de Castro's, and we were just flying around looking for patches of fish, because you got the 6 mile and 12 mile, 9 mile and 12 mile lump, and it was a beautiful day. And then suddenly we could smell all this burning smell, and you know what it's like when you're short out a battery or something like that. It's horrible. And all this smoke was coming out from under the dashboard. So luckily it didn't actually catch on fire. So we had to shoot back to Ceduna as quick as possible, hoping that it wasn't going to catch on fire. But that was the minor one. Another time, we worked out of Nullarbor for years, and the Nullarbor Motel, they actually bought a big fuel tanker up there, and they built new rooms, because at one stage in the whole industry there was something like 15 airplanes. 17, yeah. I was actually going to say that, and I thought perhaps I was exaggerating. And so we all flew out of there, and we were spending a lot of time basically due south of Nullarbor on the continental shelf. And this particular day, I was with a guy called Tim Reedman, and we were in a Cessna 337, Victor Hotel Charlie Hotel uniform, still remember it to the day. And we'd been flying for about 5 hours, and I physically fly the plane all day and let the young guy relax, and he looks out the window or reads a book or goes to sleep or something. And even though he's the licensed pilot, but I couldn't sit there and tell him what to do. I had to physically do it, because I wanted to position the plane where I wanted to go. And after 5 hours, Stan Lucan said, okay, Kiwi, the wind's come up too strong. You're not going to see anything. Just head off back to Nullarbor and we'll call you tomorrow. So I said to Tim, okay, it's your plane. So I handed the plane over him and I pushed my seat back because I do a lot of concentrating because you're flying the plane, talking on the radio, and that's probably why I talk so much because it's part of my job to inform everybody, looking in the sea and everything. So I just shut my eyes and relaxed. And then all of a sudden I heard clunky clunk, clunkety clunk, clunkety clunk, and the plane started shaking like this, and I'm wide alert, and we started to fill up with smoke in the cabin, and I thought, God, our GPS, but this by the time we had GPSs, and I thought that had shorted out or had a fire or something. So I jumped in the back seat, that was fine, and then I looked out the port side window, and we've got booms. There's 2 booms on the Cessna 337, and there's a little observation mirror. It's only so big, and the cowl flap was open and black smoke was just pouring out of it. So I jumped back into my seat and got on the radio and said, guys, we've got a problem. I said, we've got smoke pouring out of the back engine. I said, we've got clunkety clunk like a chaff cutter. Looked at the instruments, the oil pressure was dropping rapidly and the temperature was going up into the red. Tim was sort of onto it, but I said to Tim, even though he was the pilot in command, Tim, make sure we shut down the correct motor and feather that motor, because I'd heard a report of a guy in a Cessna 337 spotting prawns up in Darwin, in the Gulf up there, Gulf of Carpentaria. He had the same problem, and in his panic he shut down the wrong engine and had no power and finished up dishing in the sea. So I said to Tim, make sure we do the right thing. So he was good, and he pulled all the power back, and then what happens is you pull it back and you feather the motor, because the propeller is a variable pitch propeller, and if you stop it, it's like a big plywood board stopping you to slow you down, and it's a lot of resistance and using up more fuel, and you lose a bit of height. So when the propeller is feathered, it comes around and it faces like this, like a knife. So that worked really well, and we lost 1,000 feet on the way in, and about every 5 minutes they call me up and say, where are you now? And I say, here's a Latin long. And they said, the funny part about it is, one of the guys on the boat said, when you told them that you had a problem, they said every boat in the fleet turned and started heading, and I get goosebumps even thinking about it because I get a bit emotional, heading to where you were, because they said if you ditched in the sea, they wanted to save us, you know. So they all started heading in, but we actually progressed faster than the boats, of course. And then when we got ashore, over the land, I told them we were over the cliffs, and we had something like 12 miles to go to the airport. But they couldn't get the undercarriage down with the hydraulics, so there's a pump in between the pilot and myself, and so I had to pump this pump, you know, like 200 times to get the undercarriage down. And then we landed safely, and we called them up, and they were all relieved. And what had happened is, apparently, from what I understand, the plane had been in for a major service, and the cylinder, I don't know whether you have nuts and bolts and you have a hole through there, and they put a stainless steel wire, they twitch it up, and I don't know whether it came loose or something like that, but what happened is the actual cylinder came up off the block, and it was spewing fuel and oil out over, and how we didn't catch on fire, we don't know. So that was one of the instances. We were off the coast of New South Wales. It wasn't an engine failure, but it was an absolutely glassy day, and we were all flying out of Merimbula. There was Safgol and Heinz and Tuna processors, and I think there could have even been independent guys. And we were way out north east of the coast, flat glassy calm day, and a huge southerly buster came up the coast, absolutely raging, and everybody bailed out, but we were the last plane. And I think I had Milo Mislov in the back as an observer, pilot myself, and we went in underneath the southerly buster instead of trying to get around it. And we got about a kilometre in, and we went bang, and the whole plane just shuddered and stopped and dropped probably 500 feet down. And I remember there was dead flies, and I think might have been different things were flying around, briefcases, everything was smashing the things. The guy in the back, he hit the roof, and my seatbelt, I don't know what happened, but I think I hit the side and everything. And when I looked up, the young guy, Paul Bradley, I think his name was, he was the colour of that, hanging on for grim death, but he recovered, and we got in and landed. Another time, one of the boats, Tony Sanik's boats, had a problem with the engine and needed a fuel line, and apparently they tried to replace it, and it was no good. So they told us that we had to fly out and drop this fuel line, but it was very, very light. So I wrapped it all up in bubble wrap and put a little bit of weight in there, and they wanted us to drop it. So when we got about 10 miles from the boat, I said, look, put a tinny into the water and keep it a couple of 100 metres away from the boat, and we're going to come right down low over the water, and as we get close to you, I open up the gull window, and then as I see the tinny, I'll throw the parcel out. And I thought, this is a very light parcel. I was worried about the back prop. And before I left, I said to Lyle Yench, what about you think if we shut down and feather the back motor and just fly in on one motor to drop the parcel? And he said, no, I wouldn't do it, because he said, if something happens, you're stuffed. So we took his advice, and what you do is you prepare, it's almost like a landing. You pull back the power and you put 1/3 of flaps, and you ease into this, almost like you're going to land on water, but you're ready for the controls to put your accelerate. So we came in, and I was on my side, and I opened up the gull window, and as I saw it, I threw it, and I said, okay, go. And he went boom, and immediately the front engine just went boom, locked up. And so he had to push the power up, and we waddled, and we waddled, and we waddled, and I thought, gee, we're going to finish up in the water. But luckily, we'd burned up enough fuel, it wasn't too hot, we were two small guys, and so we didn't exceed weight, and she recovered, and we finally got up and started heading for home. And I called up and said, we've got an engine failure, and they said, oh, come back to Port Lincoln. And I said, no, I'm not going back to Port Lincoln, we're going to the nearest land, and we're going to land. And so we got to land, and we were close to Ceduna, so we went and landed in Ceduna on the one engine. Yeah, so I'm trying to work out where the third one. I know we had three different engine failures over the 34 years, but survived them all.
Kiwi, in looking at the fishery and looking at that stock down there each year, what's your recollection of how the stock went up and down?
Well, as you know, I started in 79, and we saw lots of fish, but in 82, I think 83, it was in the polling days, there was total catch was something like 21,000 tonnes of bluefin tuna. And they were catching little babies. They were going up there and just poling these things. They were like little salmon, filling up the boat up off the Streaky Bay and all those lumps and everything else. And so the government decided, in its wisdom, to bring in quotas. And there was a criteria, and it went from 50 boats and 17 aeroplanes down to 10 boats and about 5 aeroplanes, and then it even got a bit less at the end. And they had to have catch history and your investment and different criteria. So it amalgamated from all that to a few boats, and they brought in quotas, and everybody was screaming blue murder that, you know, it's all going to ruin the industry and everything, but it was actually very successful. And then over the years they increased the quota a little bit and took it away, but we saw a rise in the fish. And I remember one day I counted 257 patches of bluefin. That was just me personally, and the other guys counted a lot, and we estimated one day there was something like 25,000 tonne of fish that the spotters had seen in that one particular day on a perfect glassy calm day. So the stocks are still there.
Was that after the quotas?
Oh yes, after the quotas. Yes, after the quotas. And everything's shifted now. I've been out of it for this will be 3.5 years, nearly 4 years. And we used to always catch our fish basically southeast of Ceduna. 132.20 was a hot spot, and previous to that it was 128.40 on the shelf. We could go out there time and time again, and it was just one huge area, and a lot of the fish there didn't ripple, and a lot of I haven't explained that actually yet, but the fish normally on a good summer's day come up about 11, 12, 1 o'clock, and they come up to the surface, and whether they sunbait like girls on bikinis on the beach, we don't know, but they come up and they ripple, and you pick up the ripple. Or there's feeding patches where they're working in bait, or there's flattening patches where they're running down the breeze and leaving a big flattening area behind them, or colour patches. And this 128.40 was a famous spot for colour patches, and the boats couldn't see them, but us in the planes at 1,500 feet or 1,800 feet, because we used to have separation of 200 or 300 feet, depends on how many planes, we would look down the water. Instead of scanning like this, looking for ripplers and feeding patches and flattening patches, I would look down, and I'd spend all my time staring in the water and looking for a dark colour. And then if you circle it and then you see the fish shine and you know it's bluefin. And then sometimes you would see hundreds of tonnes of skipjack tuna, which is just amazing because they all fluoresce. And then you'll see mackerel or you'll see bait. So, but the answer to the question is that in my time of 34 years, I've actually seen a greater rise of the tuna. And they're actually leaving the smaller fish alone. So you'll get a 100-tonne patch of 10-kilo fish. Well, the boats don't want them because if they catch them, they've got to feed them and it takes too much money to feed them. So that 100-tonne fish is swimming in the ocean, and if the Japanese or the Taiwanese or Indonesians or whoever the other companies don't catch them, that 100-tonne this year could be 250-tonne next year, and it could be 500-tonne the year after. So, and because they got quotas, they can only just take a certain amount. So every year at the end of the season, there's more fish swimming in the sea than even though they've taken. But you still get opposition to it.
That's good. That's excellent. Now, you've taken us from when quotas come in and the increase again.
Yeah.
Did you see the corresponding decrease from when you started to when the thing got very low?
I never really took much notice. I've got all my records. I've got books there with all the stuff that we saw. Yeah, there probably was to start with. You know, when that year they took 21,000 tonne. We had a few years. Well, if you go into the CSIRO and talk to them about it, they've got all the records of what the surveys had seen and what the tuna boats have caught. It's all too complicated for me because there's a lady called Jessica Farley who runs the CSIRO survey thing, and she sends me all the information each year, and it's just technical. It's all X's and crosses, and this equals Y, and that does this, and biomass here and stuff like that. I don't really understand it, but just for my own personal thing, it probably went up a bit and then declined, and then after quotas, it gradually started to rise up again. So I think the stocks are still healthy, and it's the same with salmon. We get my cousin Peter White's a pilchard fisherman and a salmon fishing, and I help him a lot of times. I used to go and do the diving, bring the leads over the rocks and things like that for him, and we'd come into the wharf with 20 tonne of salmon, and people would come down there and abuse us for destroying the stocks, leaving none for the amateur fishermen, and it's basically the same as that. A lot of people still reckon that we're raping and pillaging the tuna and these fish, but if you go in a plane and see what we see there, people would be amazed. I've seen 2,000 tonnes of salmon at St Francis Island. The whole beach is just black with a massive thing, and at Don de Castro's Reef and Noit's Reef, massive patches of salmon, and we've seen huge patches of tuna, 200 tonne, even much more. And there was one case where I think it was Lucky S went into a patch of fish, and there was triple poling these fish, and they got about 3 fish on board. They just broke all the poles and the poling machine snapped off and everything. These fish were just massive, 250 kilo fish. And out of that patch of fish, that was all they caught, and that fish just, nobody's ever caught it since. And with the tagging of tuna, I don't know if you know about the tagging of tuna, they've tagged a lot, and there was one particular tuna they tagged at about 12 kilos off of Don de Castro's or Noit's Reef, and they caught it 17 years later off of South Africa, and it had grown to 110 kilos something. So they roam all over the ocean, yeah. But it's a very interesting business.
Other things you've seen out there that might be of interest?
Oh yes.
Events, water spouts, anything?
Oh yes, we had water spout off of Don de Castro's once, and I said to the young guy, let's go over and dip our wing in it. And he said, don't be bloody silly, you'll rip the ring off. We saw a lot of yachts, we saw manta rays, we saw whales. I've seen about 15 to 20 sperm whales lined up like the start of the Melbourne Cup. If you put a string from one end across the other, they were all perfectly, nose was just perfect, swimming in a line. But the most dramatic thing we saw, it was during the period of the CSIRO survey. We'd finished the day, and it was about 5 o'clock at night, and it was glassy, calm, hot, sunny day. And as we finished the transect, Derek Hayman was with me, and I think we had Kevin Williams' partner, she was with us in the back, came out for a trip. And I saw all this commotion. I could see a lot of white water splashing. I thought, well, there's no reefs out here. What is it? So we flew over to it, and when we got to the to the area, there were 15 sperm whales head to head in a daisy pattern, splashing like mad, and there was a whole lot of blood, and there were 7 orcas or killer whales going around and around and around them. And unfortunately for one poor whale, they were targeting that one whale, and they were working like a pack of dogs, and they would swim around and come right in and smash into it. The next one smash into it, next one smash into it. And we actually filmed it. Derek actually had an old V8 video camera, but the trouble is he set it on automatic, and every time we came around the light changed and it went in and out of focus. But we still got, I've actually got the video up in the house somewhere, but it's not the video, the VHS. And so I did a bit of research on it, and we found that Kevin Warren had seen the same thing, and there'd been very few people in the world had actually seen that happening. And other people said that the whales were so smart that the one that they were targeting, the sperm whale, they would actually try to slide up and sit on the air hole, and they would sit there to drown this thing, and then it'd fall off, and the next one would be on top, the next one would be on top. So it was an amazing sight, and we circled it for about 20 minutes and was just couldn't believe it. Anyway, the next day we had to fly again, so I had the GPS position, and we went back to the very spot. There was not a sign of anything. No killer whales, no sperm whales, nothing. And I believe from reading the book called Killers of Eden about Tom, that they used to go out and kill the whales, and then the whales would sink, and then a few days later and the gases in the body would bring it up to the surface, and that's it. But yeah, well, they were all in, if you can imagine, all in head for head, absolutely going with their tails. The white water was carrying on. They were trying to protect, and we think that
they were trying to protect their...
We reckon, I personally think that a mother of cow had given birth, and the killer whales had come in to attack her or the calf and kill it, because there was blood. There was definitely blood in the water, and these whales were trying to, use their flukes and tails and their whole body mass to try and ward off the killers. But the killers are too smart. They're too amazing.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, we've seen sailing boats. We've seen the replicas of the Endeavour and those boats out there. We've gone down and buzzed them. Let me see. In the Mediterranean, I flew in the Mediterranean for Carly Tuna. They sent us to Malta, and the only trouble is in Malta we only had a Cessna 172 with about 4.5 hours range of fuel, and we were trying to compete against all the Italians with their Paranavias, and there was a Spanish Cessna 337, and I was really annoyed because these planes would take off all day, one after the other. They would start at daybreak, and they would head out to their boats. And they all had fast tuna boats, these all planing hull tuna boats, and they'd never talk to each other. And in Australia, what happened is the first plane that went off got their area Q&H, that's the air pressure, and we would fly at 1,500 feet, so we were the first. So the next plane to come out, they'd ask us area Q&H, we'd tell it, and then they would go to 1,800 feet or 1,200 feet. So we always had separation. But over there, nobody knew who was flying at what height, and so it was dangerous, and a couple of times we had near misses. So I said to all the companies, let's get together and have a meeting at the airport in Valletta in Malta to see if we can work out some system. You don't have to tell us where you go, but just tell us what height you're going to get. So if you want to go 600 feet and these 800 feet and 1,200, so we know. So for that year that I was there, they did that. And unfortunately, the next year, we didn't get invited to go back there because I think we went off to Mexico. 2 planes, a Partanavia and a Cessna 337, had a head-on collision and 5 people were killed because of ignorance. They were all too macho, didn't want to talk to each other, didn't want to do it. It was absolutely stupid. And Ron Fuller used to actually put messages in a cigarette packet or wrapped it up in a bottle, didn't he? And one of the guys, Colin Spratt, he used to use plastic Coke bottles, and he used to fill it with engine oil. And before GPSs came out, he used to find patches of fish, and the boats might be 10 miles away, so he would open up the window and throw this bottle with a couple of litres of oil in it to hit the surface, and it would splatter and leave a big oil slick, and that was his marker in the old days. But then when guys got a bit smart and saw these oil slicks and knew that there was a patch of fish somewhere there, he got even smarter, and he would drop 4 or 5 different ones a few miles apart and he knew which one where the oil was when closest to the fish, where the others didn't. So there was all sorts of skullduggery going on. But we've been very fortunate here. The only person that was ever killed in tuna spottings in my career was a guy called Brian Shipp, and he was in the SAFGOL Era Commander. I think I won't go about the registration, but I think it's TLD. And he was working out of Eden at a place called Merimbula, and apparently he had a slight problem with the plane, and he wanted to bring it back to Adelaide to get a service or get the problem fixed. And he actually asked young Phil Gibson, did he want to come home? And Phil apparently went to the club the night before, and we were all in the club, and they had a meal and there was a show on or something, and we were all there. And Phil had too many drinks, and when Brian came to him in the morning and said that he wanted to come home, he said, no, I'm not going with you, I'm not going with you. But Brian took off from Merimbula and apparently got airborne, and then all of a sudden he radioed that he's having a problem, and instead of just turning around and landed, he apparently started doing circles. Then he came down low over Merimbula Beach, and that low that he actually dipped his wing in the water and it came out spray, lifted it up, went a bit further, dipped it again, and it caught and it tumbled, and the autopsy showed that he actually got drowned because he was still strapped in his seat. And it was devastating because we were told to go down and check the plane, and I was with Rupert Marr, and we had to go and see the wreck of the plane, and then they told us we had to go flying, and it was a very sombre day that day because we were flying in the same planes off of the coast. So, but a couple of near collisions. It's pretty scary when you're flying along and you're concentrating, and the trouble is you might be concentrating and you pull up a little bit 50 feet here, not even thinking about it, but after a while it just became automatic. You sort of knew where you had to go, and every now and again glanced at your instruments. And the other guy might be coming down 100 feet, and all of a sudden, boom! And it's happened a few times. So, but we're very, very lucky here in Australia that we basically haven't had any collisions with tuna spotting planes here. So,
Terrific.
I don't know, is that enough?
I reckon we've got plenty. Okay. What do you think of it all looking back?
Great experience. I saw a lot of the world. We worked in Solomon Islands, we worked in Croatia, we worked in Malta, we worked in Turkey, we worked in Mexico, we worked in USA. So the companies took me all over the world. I met a lot of very interesting people. I saw a lot of sites, and but I found the tuna companies very, very hard to deal with, like financially. And I remember one day, and probably Tony Sandick won't like this, but I went to his office one day and I said, look, Tony, I'm working for you doing this. I think I deserve a pay rise. And I can remember Tony put his head back like this, basically looked at me, he said, well, what more do you bloody want? And I said, why? And he said, well, you're getting a paid holiday. He said, we send you all over the world, and we pay your airfares, we pay your accommodation, you get your meals and all the rest of it, and you see all these exciting things and you meet all these people. What more do you want? You know, and he wouldn't give me a pay rise. And I was a bit cheesed off about it, really. But then when I thought about it, I went to Mexico, USA 6 years in a row, and an average, because I don't smoke or drink, I remember being in America for like 4 months, and I spent about $300. And that was to go to the movies, to buy a block of chocolate, or buy internet time, or ring up home or something like that. And so, you know, overall it was a good experience, and I'm just glad to have survived it. And the funny part about one last thing is that when I was basically retrenched, and I can probably say this on the video, that I went to the companies just before I was about 18 months off of 70. I'll be 72 in a couple of weeks. I said to them, look, I'll be 70 in 18 months. Why don't we get some young guy to come with me so I can pass on my knowledge to them? Because I got it all up here. I can still go out there today and do it, I'm sure. And they said, a good idea. And then about a week or so later, they called me in the office and they said, oh, Kiwi, we're going to put young Gibbo in your place. Bye-bye. And I was devastated, you know. And if I hadn't said anything, I would probably be still working. But you have to stop sometime. And there was a guy in America, he was 80, and he still flew and spotted. And I don't think there's any reason. I mean, my eyes have actually probably deteriorated a bit. And I noticed some of the other guys, they probably still wear glasses. And I was one that always had binoculars. And even though I'd fly, I'd pick up my binoculars and I'd scan, and it just gave you that extra range. And a lot of times I might just see a few splashes, or I see a ripple, or I see birds. With the naked eye, I wouldn't have seen them. And when I first started, they rubbished me and said, oh, you know, he's useless, he needs bloody binoculars. But I think over the years, most of the other guys took it up too. So, and when I finished, I said to the CSIRO, now I'm finished commercial spotting, what about you putting me in the plane to do surveys? And I was told that I wasn't qualified after 34 years to be a tuna spotter for the government survey. Can you believe that?
Just one last question too also. Bird life in terms of...
Masses of...
You know, so looking at the whole bird situation.
Overall,
the shearwaters or the mutton birds, see millions of them. We see white birds working there's a bird called, they call it the Jesus Christ bird. It's a very, very small bird and it hops on water. And Jürgen Zemke, when I worked with him, he used to always say that when you saw black pilot whales and these little Jesus Christ birds, you'll find tuna. And he was right about 98% of the time. It was quite amazing. We'd see birds working, diving into the water. You'd see a patch of fish would come up and chew into the sardines or the pilchards or different bait, and there'd be bits left over, so all the birds would dive in. We call them feeding patches, you know, with the birds working. Yeah, well, albatross, as I said, and lots of whales, killer whales and sperm whales, and a lot of dolphins. Dolphins like you wouldn't believe it. I've seen patches of dolphin. There must have been 500,000 dolphins in a patch just going berserk. And sometimes you can see them from 20 miles away. And I think, wow, if this was bluefin tuna, this was a mother lode. But you get over there and it's all the dolphins. A lot of sea life.
did you see any decrease in the size of the dolphin schools over the years?
No, because the tuna here, the tuna industry doesn't get involved with the it's not like in the Western Pacific where they target the dolphins, because the yellowfin tuna and the skipjack tuna congregate underneath and then they shoot them in. And but they've devised a thing called a back down, where once the boat shot the fish in and all the fish and the dolphins are in, they got a special procedure where they back down and they lower the back end of the net, and the dolphins, 95% of the dolphins swim out, but the tuna don't. But we don't have that interaction here. So no, you just see sometimes amazing amount of tuna, dolphins and all this, a lot of sea life out there.